let's start with a bit of an overview of this Belgian GP. Round 13 of the 2025 season, and it's the penultimate race before we head to the actual summer break, not the mini summer break that we've just had. Held at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Its history in Grand Prix racing goes back about 100 years. In fact, exactly 100 years to 1925, and it has been a regular feature on the calendar. The current circuit is about half the length of what it used to be, but it's still the longest circuit on the calendar at just over 7 kilometers. High speed, 19 corners, probably turn 7 after the Kemmel Straight is your best opportunity at overtakes, but many other iconic corners on this circuit, including Blanchimont, very high speed corner, and of course the Radillon and Eau Rouge complex. As reference, it's the third sprint race weekend of the season so far, so that is another thing to there's a word in there somewhere. Just keep it in mind. It's a sprint weekend.
Be aware of it?
Yeah, be aware of it. That'll do. And we'll get into that a little bit later on as well. Lewis Hamilton won this race last year. And although not on track, if you remember, George Russell actually won this race on track, leading home a Mercedes 1-2 until he was disqualified. And it remains his last victory, if you don't include sprints, which of course he won the Chinese sprint earlier this year. Let's start out front though, Sam. 8 points separates the two championship leaders, Oscar Piastri, the Aussie, in front, and then Lando Norris in second. Who's leading coming out of this weekend?
Gosh, Spa is absolutely steeped in history, the way you ran through that lovely synopsis to welcome us back to racing. So many different layouts. So you look at some of the old clips of them racing past hay bales going through towns nearby, right? It's crazy. Even, the modern layout that we have now is a brilliant racetrack. So excited to be back there. And I do think that Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri will come back into the racing foray, the action, as close as ever. I really do think it's going to be a really, really tight Grand Prix between the two of them. I think that because it's a sprint weekend and the way that sets up the weekend, we've got less practice, of course, only one practice session that takes place before we get into the action. The sprint qualifying is a slightly different format, of course, to main qualifying. The sprint race taking place on Saturday morning. Because of this immediate entry into the racing, essentially, the lack of warm-up, the lack of build-up, I think Oscar Piastri has the upper hand here. So often we've seen Lando Norris build himself into weekends really, really well, and more often than not, the second half of races, the latter half of races, it tends to be that that's where he's the fastest man on track. He's often hunting down his teammate in Oscar Piastri. Canada springs to mind. The way he pulled away in Austria was fantastic. The way he caught up to the back of Oscar Piastri in Silverstone. I know the penalty then decided things, but the gap was coming down handily. I think was going to be close at the end of that race. I think it shows that when Norris does build into a weekend and he becomes really comfortable, more often than not, he is pretty much the toughest man to beat on track at the end of the race weekend. But we know how level-headed Oscar Piastri is. We know how calm he is. And I do think he flies into weekends and it's all guns firing, all guns blazing. I do think he's able to hit the track running. So as you were to say, which is not true because they use tyres, not their legs. So that's good. Welcome to Formula One if you're new. So I think Piastri's going to have the upper hand for it being a sprint weekend. And I do think that should the sprint go the way of McLaren and other teams doesn't get involved, which it might do. Mercedes, of course, doing well here last year, Ferrari with the upgrades. And guess what? Max Verstappen exists. Then there's a real chance that maybe they don't win either race. But they are favourites. They are definitely the ones to beat. And I think Piastri maybe just has the edge going through this weekend. What do you think, Ben?
I think, firstly, just to say, it's a good thing that the situation for both of them right now, the situation that they both find themselves in, is they don't have to worry too much about what the other driver is doing. Like sometimes you get into a championship fight and one of the drivers gets a bit of a lead, enough of a lead to maybe start feeling a little bit comfortable. And at that point, the driver who's chasing not only needs to win races to, get that gap down, but they're also worried about the other driver, not finishing second. They kind of need them to fall back a little bit. We're not in that position right now with this McLaren duo. Like they can just focus on what they're doing and it doesn't matter. Piastri and Norris can say, I can win this race. I'll take the championship lead. It doesn't matter if my opponent is second, third, fifth, 10th. Doesn't matter. I can focus on what I'm doing, which I think is good for the championship battle as a whole. I think both drivers will feel pretty okay after Silverstone and coming into this race for different reasons. Like from Lando Norris's perspective, he'll feel quite confident going into this race weekend because he's won the last two. And it was the perfect bounce back after Canada, right? Like Canada had the potential to really derail his season. Like it felt like a defining moment. It's not like they've been racking up DNFs between them, right? Like it was a critical error. And he's bounced back perfectly, like literally perfectly. He's won 2 out of 2 races off the back of that. And of course, getting the boost of a home win, that will have helped him a lot to aid in his confidence. But Piastri, I think he'll feel pretty good as well. Because in Canada and Austria, I feel like Lando Norris was the faster of the 2 drivers in both of those races. Silverstone, that wasn't the case. Like Silverstone, Piastri did have that lead, and he can point to the fact that he didn't win, not because of his pace, not because he made an error in terms of like on-track action. Like the reason was the safety car penalty. Now, of course, there was a lot of debate coming out of that as to whether it was his fault and whether he should have got that 10-second penalty or not. But even so, like he will say, that's the reason I lost, not anything else. I think he'll feel pretty good going into this one as well. And what you say on the sprints is an interesting one. I think Piastri probably does have the advantage in that regard. And it might be a bit of a preview going into the second half of this season because we do have another 3 sprints that happen quite late on in the year that will be vitally important. You've got more points up for grabs. The other thing I want to say on this one, Sam, specifically to do with the Belgian GP, Oscar Piastri, his track record across the last couple of years is quite good. So you go back to 2023, he qualified and finished second for the sprint race, which I remember very vividly doing the review to that sort of sprint weekend. So I remember because it was a solo record, and I remember saying words to the effect of, "This is the introduction to, like, I'm sold on him. This is the introduction to him." It was such a great qualifying and sprint race. And of course, last year he was better as well.
We coined it the Oscar Piastri section, didn't we? That middle sector. Yeah. He set the car up to be so specifically built for that middle sector that I think there was an audacious claim that at one point he was something like 3 times faster through that section in terms of time difference than the other cars around him, but was losing time going down the Kemmel Straight, for example. He's fantastic here. I think this really suits his driving. He's already stated publicly he absolutely adores this racetrack. It feels electrifying to him. The fans, this is a purist's track. And I think you look at something like the Spa 24, where endurance racing comes here and it just comes alive. It is an incredible place to go racing. It has the same feeling as a Monza. It has the same feeling as a Silverstone. It really is one of those historic areas we go racing that I'm so happy we're still getting to go to. It's had a lot of threat recently that it might disappear from my calendar, and it still might. It's not, through the woods just yet. At least. Yeah. It is, when we've not got that certainty that it's going to be here permanently for a long time. So hopefully it provides another belter of the Grand Prix, and this is a reason to keep it around rather than to continue to let it slip out of our grasp. But Piastri has been the better of the 2 across sprints this season as well. I think that he beat Lando Norris, of course, in the Chinese sprint race that we had, and he was only 1 place behind him in Miami. Overall, he's accumulated more points in sprint races than Norris has. I think that stands him in good stead. I think that shows that form is on his side when it comes to this racing. Plus the Silverstone penalty that he picked up after the safety car. I think he uses as motivation. He was fuming after that. He was
by Piastri standards.
Yeah, by Piastri standards, he was living. Yeah. For me, mildly ticked off if I'm reacting like that. I'm fuming. I'm slightly peeved. He held his own very well. I thought he held his composure really, really well. But you could tell that he was really miffed out of what happened with that. And I think he'll use that as motivation. He's played second fiddle in terms of the results of the last 2 Grand Prix. In Canada, it wasn't like he set the track on fire as well there. And he beat his teammate because he crashed into the back of him. Every chance that Norris actually passes him in Canada, because at that point, he was the faster of the 2 drivers. So he's going to want to make sure that he goes into this summer break with 2 races left, of course, leading that championship still, which he continues to do at the moment, but that he's not just leading the championship, but he's asserting himself again as that faster of the 2 drivers, as the more dominant of the 2 drivers. It's really crucial, I think, for both of them. I know it sounds really obvious and really silly to get on top before we go into this summer break. So Piastri's on a bit of a losing streak in comparison to Norris, I think, over the last 2. He's going to bounce back.
I just wanted to add to what you said as well on the sprint advantage that Piastri seems to have so far this year. It's important to remember as well, that Belgian sprint podium that he had in 2023, that was his first podium at all in the sport. And his first win in the sport was also a sprint, Qatar in the same season. So he does have a good track record when it comes to these races. And we've obviously had 2 so far this year already. He out-qualified Lando Norris in both of them. Like he qualified 3rd in China, Norris was 6th. He qualified 2nd in Miami, Norris was 3rd. And of course, as you've already said with China, he was on the podium. He finished 2nd behind Hamilton. Norris was all the way down in 8th. Miami, Norris did beat Piastri. If you remember back to why, though, a very fortunate safety car timing. Otherwise, Piastri was going to win that one as well. So it's not all bad news for Lando Norris fans, though, because if you remember just 2 races ago, the Austrian GP, appreciate it wasn't a sprint, despite the fact that I was convinced it was for about 3 months heading into it.
Our schedule was a mess.
Yeah. But he didn't do FP1 that weekend, if you remember. It was Alex Dunn who did that. So he had limited practice time there versus his teammate. And that still ended up okay. So it's not all doom and gloom. Like, this is very much up for the taking. But Piastri will be confident based on what he's done in sprints so far this year.
The fact we're arguing the particulars here tells you just how close these two are.
Yeah.
And it's a great, at least we're getting this great fight out front, because otherwise it could be a dull championship. So I'm glad that they're going at it.
Yeah, I mean, 12 races into the season, 2 sprints into the season. There's a reason there's only single digits between these 2 drivers at this stage. From McLaren to Ferrari. Now, Ferrari has been planning a rear suspension upgrade for seemingly 26 years. In reality, it's only been a few months, but quite some time as far as F1 standards go. And it was somewhat unveiled as part of a filming day that they recently did. But of course, it will have its full competitive debut at Spa this weekend, we believe. The hope is that they can finally run the car lower to the ground, which, if you recall back to China, was the reason that they were disqualified from that Grand Prix. They've been protecting against that result happening again. So the hope is they can run the car lower to the ground and maximize downforce. Is it going to work?
The ground effect era of Formula One. We don't have long left of the ground effect era of Formula One. It comes to an end in December, and there's really been a lot of mixed reviews about how this has been seen in Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, I believe, despises the ground effect era of Formula One. I think he's like a pretty torrid time, but I'm sure he's hoping that this upgrade, which, as you said, has been worked on since Jean Todt was working with Michael Schumacher at Ferrari 26 years ago, might actually come in clutch and might help them have some end of season performance out Ferrari. I know you've been developing this year for a quarter of a century, but maybe now focus on the new year. Maybe stop bringing upgrades. You aren't winning this season. It's not coming to fruition. And actually, finishing 4th will give you more development time. So maybe also stop trying to beat the others to second place. Just maybe. Long picture, long game. Come on, Ferrari. Do they have a chance here if it works? Yeah. But on one caveat, it's got to be dry. Because that Ferrari, unless it is revolutionized by this rear suspension, is quite poo-poo when it is wet on the racetrack. Lewis Hamilton is brilliant. You can dance through the rain as much as you want. And Charles Leclerc is no slouch either. But if that car is a handful, it doesn't matter how good you are. I realistically think you're not going to beat something like a McLaren, which is so strong in all conditions. You need perfect conditions. A Ferrari, you need quite literally the world to stop spinning in order for them to actually get 2 cars on the podium at the moment. So, yeah, they're getting a lot of things to go their way. If it works, there's a real chance it could come together. Because how many times have we said it, Ben? There's something in that car. And with a lineup like Hamilton and Leclerc, sure, it should be possible. But it's also Ferrari. So it definitely might not be possible.
There is something in that car. They'll discover it in Vegas, probably, but there is something. Yeah. It does feel like Ferrari has been in this weird holding pattern ever since like the Chinese double disqualification happened. I appreciate that day. The reason for the disqualification was slightly different between Leclerc and Hamilton, but the effect of it was essentially we have to work around this issue until we actually get a solution in place. This is that solution, or at least this is what they hope it will be, that solution. It's got to happen for them here. Like it must happen for them here. It feels like almost a last throw of the dice when it comes to 2025, because if this doesn't work, I don't think they've got anything else in the pipeline that will. So they are going to be fingers crossed on that pit wall that A, it's not going to rain so they can see if it is actually going to work or not, and B, that they finally get some solid results. Whether they can challenge McLaren for wins or not remains to be seen, but they just need to see some form of improvement. In terms of like the risk of disqualification that they've had so far this year with, wearing the plank down as a result of that car being too low to the ground and trying to protect against that is amplified and maximized at tracks that have high-speed corners. We have some high-speed corners here this weekend. Obviously, Blanchimont is very fast. The Eau Rouge and Radillon section nowadays is not far off flat out, is it? You've got...
Pouhon will massacre you.
It will.
That car, a Formula One car around Pulwang is a sight to behold. And let's hope that they can take it flat without dragging that floor. Because in Austria, it looked like they were scraping that floor a lot. And obviously you get randomly selected. You don't get pulled in through choice. It's random. So there's every chance that they might have been close to the line there. Lewis Hamilton's back will be crying out for some kind of safety, I'm sure.
Yeah. So if those upgrades are effective, we should see it pretty much straight away with some of the corners that we get at Spa. It seems like the perfect track to try these out.
Yeah, you say that. They had to pick up a living sprint weekend to do it on, though, didn't they?
They did, but it is Ferrari after all.
What time shall we embed the car and do lots of practice? Let's do it in Belgium. We like Belgium. One practice session.
Yeah. Why not? I don't know. Australia. That might have been a good idea, Ferrari. How about there?
Yeah, okay. Next year. We'll get them next year.
Yeah, they'll turn up with a 2025 car next year. Last point on this is obviously at this stage in the regulations, it is difficult for upgrades to have a massive impact. Just we've seen so much of these regs that these dramatic turnarounds tend to happen quite early on in the cycle, not this late on. That doesn't mean that it won't work, but it decreases the odds of it working.
Ideal world, Ben, where does this put them? If it does work, where does this put them?
I'm going to be coy and not say anything because it might spoil a bold prediction later on.
Oh, darn it. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me because it might also spoil a bold prediction later on.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. Want to focus on the weather. We like being weather people here on the Late Breaking podcast, and it looks uncertain going into this weekend across all days, really, at least at this early stage in the week. Do you think that uncertainty around the weather could be positive for either Mercedes and or Verstappen?
You ever think you could be a weatherman?
I think it was something I wanted to be when I was like 7.
Is it really?
Yeah.
You know, one of my favourite scenes in all of Sigma is when Steve Carell and Anchorman is the weatherman. He's wearing the green trousers.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to laugh now. That is so funny. Good. How will it affect Max and Mercedes? I think beneficially. It seems to be that Mercedes cannot deal with the high heats. Now, summer in Europe, folks, you have Europe summer. I know a lot of people like to travel around Europe and hit the beaches of the Mediterranean, but on face value, it gets hot. It gets very, very warm here in Europe in the summertime. And Mercedes, despite improvements, despite definitely being better, still can't seem to create a car that can deal with these incredibly warm temperatures that we're seeing around Europe. And I think that's evident when you look at races like Austria that we had. The issue is, of course, they'll go, oh, we'll be better in the rain, it'll be cooler. And then you look at what happens at Silverstone. One of their drivers decided to not finish the race. The other one was all over the shop. All over the shop.
I love it anyway.
No,
I'm not going to do it. I want to
crash. Just going to hit him in the back. See you later. So, yeah, I think Mercedes will be hoping for a bit of a refresh, a restart, going into maybe the second half of this season now. They want to make sure that they finish before the summer break on a high. And George Russell does typically drive pretty well when it comes to the wet. We're still willing to see Kimi Antonelli in a little bit of those wet conditions, a little bit uncertain as to how good he will be in these wet weather conditions. But Russell is good. And I do think the Mercedes will thrive in intermediate weather, not full wet weather. I think we've seen there already that is more just kind of a who can keep the car on the track with these current Formula One cars. Max Verstappen, if you don't know, if you're new to the sport, he's bloody good at Formula One racing.
And here at Spa specifically.
Very good at Spa specifically. And if you only have to go back and go, oh, can I see nothing evidence as to Max Verstappen being good at wet weather racing? Go watch Brazil last year. That's all you need to do. That would tell you 2 hours of pure content of Max Verstappen just being great in wet weather. Harry is not here. I hate it, but I'll have to say it. Count him out your peril. That man will absolutely rinse and repeat. Literally mop up the competition, rinse out into the sink, go again. The guy absolutely loves wet weather. He can just carve lines on a racetrack that it feels like no one else can. And in that Red Bull, which of course for the first time is not being managed by Christian Horner, they've got Lauren Mekies at the helm, which will be very interesting to see how that plays out across the weekend. I can't imagine we'll see dramatic differences, but we'll see. There's a real chance that Max Verstappen could be a serious contender for the race win, should it be a little bit drizzly. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think they'll both be hoping for a bit of rain this weekend, either across the full weekend or in one session or whatever they can get, really. It does look like we are it's not going to be a washout. I don't think we're going to get, Belgium from 4 years ago, but it does look like there's.
I don't want that.
No, we don't want that. But it does look like there will be a threat of rain across every single day as it is right now. And I think that's exactly what they'll want. It sounds slightly odd because if we remember back to a grand total of one race ago at Silverstone, of course, we had rain there and McLaren still mopped up. They finished first and second comfortably. And I think it's a credit to the situation that McLaren have put themselves in, how they were able to dominate that race, because at least two of the main factors as to why they were a comfortable 1-2. Firstly, Max Verstappen was on a risky setup that worked very well in qualifying, did not work at all well for wet weather in the race. And you had George Russell, who took a strategic gamble from the off, going on to the dry tyres where it wasn't the right call. I say this because both of those things only happen because of the pressure McLaren are putting on the other teams to win. All of the other teams and drivers know that at the moment, with the way that the competition is spread out, if McLaren don't mess things up, they're probably going to win and they're probably going to be 1-2. And it's just leading to, like, I don't think Verstappen and Red Bull try that strategy if they're 20 points off in the Drivers' Championship. I don't think even Russell, with how much he likes these experimental strategies, I think he's probably talked down from it from Mercedes if they're more in the championship fight than what they are. They're having to be really experimental to find ways to beat McLaren. But even so, I still think the wet weather gives them a better chance than the dry weather does. They were both very good in Australia in the wet early on in the year. You've already demonstrated how brilliant Verstappen has been in wet weather races in recent years. You only have to go back to 2021 for how good George Russell was in wet weather conditions here when he got a podium as a result of getting P2 in qualifying. I think they'll both be hoping for to add a few variables into this weekend.
What do you think Tsunoda will get up to this weekend? Think he'll bounce back? Think it might help him? Think the change in leadership might support his ability?
Oh, you're reading my mind. That was a question I was going to ask you, because I think with the changes, obviously, Lauren Mekies is now taking over at Red Bull. He was previously in charge of Racing Bulls. That's now being taken over by Alan Permain. There is a reuniting almost of Mekies and Tsunoda at the senior team now. And we know Tsunoda's been struggling a lot. And even if you compare it versus his first few races in the Red Bull, he's struggling a lot in the last few. I don't think Verstappen, is going to affect anything. He will get out there. He'll drive his up. I don't think any managerial change is going to, apart from whatever would happen with GP Lambiase, I don't think any change organizational wise would impact what Verstappen does. But Tsunoda, it could be a bit of a boost for him. Now, it's not going to give him 3 seconds worth of lap time, is it? But even if it does make him feel a little bit more comfortable, gets him half a tenth more, that midfield battle is so close that can be the difference between being knocked out in Q1 and making it through to Q3. And at that point, all of your strategic options change. Like, it's so close in that midfield that qualifying does become incredibly important. You don't need that much of an improvement for everything to change on a race weekend. So Verstappen, he'll do Verstappen things. I am really interested to see what happens with Tsunoda with the change.
Yeah, agreed. You read my mind there. I do think that Tsunoda definitely needs a bit of nurturing. You heard the story about how he initially joined the Red Bull family and he was out living in Milton Keynes, how he was really struggling. He was really, I understand him, it's Milton Keynes.
Yeah,
we'll all be struggling.
Done like roundabout.
But he had to fly himself out to at the time, I think it was the AlphaTauri headquarters, to feel more at home and to be looked after, be more accompanied. And obviously that was Franz Tost at the time, but then it became Lauren Mekies. And that does mean he's got a strong relationship there. I do think, again, much like Fred Vasseur with Leclerc and Hamilton, right? There is almost that bond that they had when they came into the sport, when they were developing, when they were youngsters. You have that weirdly like paternal connection, that kind of, you were the person professionally that helped me in and guided me here. And I do wonder if having that arm around the shoulder instinct and being looked after a little bit and knowing that someone's got your best interests at heart will allow Tsunoda to drive a little bit more freely, hopefully meaning that he'll show off some more talent, which means that hopefully he'll be able to start separating himself from a Q1, early Q2 elimination and maybe pushing, if he qualifies 11th in the main race here and finishes in 10th, that's a good start. That's a better step forward than what we've been seeing.
It would be. It would be. That's just how tough it's been for him recently. Just one more point on Mercedes. Obviously, they won this race last year. And not only won,
technically.
They were a 1-2 on track at the end before the disqualification. So is there can they look at that for any hope whatsoever? Or is it just not shaping up the same way this season?
No, the season's very different. It's got a very different identity to it. You saw how McLaren at this point were barely the dominant force, even though obviously they came in to win things towards the end of the season, and how much that shaped it. Ferrari actually were winning races, remember, in 2024. So that's how much things can change.
I doubt they even remember.
Wait, we did what? So as much as Mercedes will be there, they're always very competitive. George Russell is always able. We've got the burglar is the nickname for a reason. If an opportunity arises, he will seize the day, I'm sure. Kimi Antonelli is, again, he's a rookie. He has this raw ability, but it does feel very 50-50 as to whether he's actually going to be able to pull out that pace, pull out that raw ability and use it in a race weekend like Spa, especially if it's wet, if it's slippery. If you crash here, you will be punished. There is gravel, there are barriers, you will be out of this Grand Prix or you will pay a heavy price for it. Kimi Antonelli is so electrically fast. He's so good. I just want to see it actually put down on the track. I think that's where Mercedes will be hesitant.
Yeah, I don't think this season is shaping up in the same way as 2024, so I don't think you can compare too much on that one. If you looked at last season, like they had no podiums in the first 8 races of the season, and then in the 5 leading up to the Belgian GP, they had 5 podiums and 2 wins. It's not the same this year. If you look at the last 6 races, if we're looking at the form book, Canada was obviously very good, but is increasingly looking like an anomaly. So if you take that out of the last 6 and you're left with the other 5 from the last 6, they've scored 29 points. For context, Sauber have 31.
That is a worrying statistic.
It is. And obviously, again, Canada was great, but the more races that don't look like Canada, the more Canada does look, unfortunately, like an anomaly. So I don't know. I probably thought last season they weren't in with a shot of the win either. So if I say the same thing again, maybe they'll win again, but I don't see it.
You say that, but they recently just done brilliantly at Silverstone. Like the form was starting to emerge at that point, and there hasn't been any form that started to emerge at that point.
Exactly. One final point before we move on to bold predictions, Sam. Tyres. So last year we brought the C2, C3, C4 compounds to Spa. We've still got the C4 and the C3, so they'll still make the soft and the medium compound, but we're actually skipping a tyre compound this weekend. So it's the C1 that will be the hard tyre. So it's a 1 set harder than last year for the hard tyre. Do you think that will make much of an impact?
I absolutely love it when we do a tyre compound skip. I think it really shakes up strategy. And I think it allows the opening up of whether you go for a long run, 1 stop, and you use that C1 and you just grind it out, consistency, clean air, and you hope for maybe a safety car coming out towards the end of that stint. Or do you go for the more rough and ready, fast-paced 2-stop, and actually you go for a medium, a soft, or something like that, and it allows you to actually get in, be quick, set your lap times fast, get back on a new set of tyres and go again, and you use the undercut, you try and utilize that. Now, that will work brilliantly if there isn't a safety car at play. That will allow you to run that race properly. Also, if you've got stuck in dirty air, you've got to be able to get the overtakes done quickly. But I'm glad that we've got this break here, because I do think it should shuffle up a little bit the strategy that we're going to see. Of course, if it rains, all of it is completely irrelevant.
Of course, that is the caveat to all this discussion as well. I think it's an interesting one. I think their theory is last year, obviously, George Russell tried this, what seemed like an audacious 1-stop. He pit on lap 10, I think it was, and then just went to the end on that C2 hard compound. I think maybe Pirelli were worried that seeing what Russell did, everyone would just go to that strategy and we'd just get 1-stops across the board. So they've introduced something a little bit different. The theory, I think, is by having that even harder compound for the hard, that it slows that strategy down enough that the 2-stop is sort of brought
Hamilton
back into
would
play.
have caught him last year if this is the tyre he was on, I believe.
I think so. I think that's the theory. The worry is actually there isn't any tyre wear concerns, and anyone doing George Russell's strategy from last year can just hammer the hard tyre even more than Russell did, and then it works out for the one stop. So if both of those strategies are in play, we could be in for a good weekend in terms of a mixture of strategies. Just hope one doesn't end up stronger than the other and it's a slam dunk one way or the other.
Bit of pot luck for you, Ben. Who's the one driver that tries to stay out for almost the entire race on that hard tyre?
Still George Russell. Hasn't changed. Him and Alex Albon.
They just keep rolling.
Yeah. If there's a possibility, George Russell is like, let's pit after lap 1 and then just go to the end of the hard tyre.
He's placed life on extreme hard mode. He's like, let's just do it differently to everyone else.
He does not want to win races in a standard way.
I am always the hero or I am out of here.
I respect it, Right, we've waited long enough. Let's do some bold predictions.
Gather around, little children, and listen to my song about my F1 bold predictions and how they'll all be wrong.
I would ask Sam for his bold prediction. I would give my own bold prediction. But before we do either of those, should we hear from Harry?
I suppose I'll let him go first. If he takes one of ours back,
Let's hear what he has to say.
Hello everyone, Harry here reporting in from Milos in Greece, which is very much like Bognor Regis in the UK. Sorry I'm not there, but I will be back on the review episode on Sunday. My bold prediction for the Belgian GP is that the sprint race and the real race will have two completely different top threes.
It's pretty bold.
I mean, I'll take that, Harry Eid, on holiday.
You madman, Harry Eid. You madman. Sam, have you got the same bold prediction as me? Let's see.
I reckon we've just got variations here. Ferrari will win the race.
We don't have variations. We've got the same.
I've also kept my intentionally vague on driver.
I have also gone intentionally vague. I am being specific enough to say it will be the main race.
No, I am the same. Sorry, just to be clear. I am also the main race. So we live together, we die together.
All right, let's do it. Ferrari win. Me and you, we're together on this.
Curse them forever.
Come on, Ferrari.
One of you has to do it.
This is your last bit of optimism for 2025. If this doesn't go our way, you are getting endless doom for the rest of the year.
Pretend we don't exist. There's only 9 teams.
Yes, that's fine by me. Sprint pole, sprint win, pole 1, 2, 3. Harry's got something else to say.
So sorry for the quad bike that arrived in the background there at the end of my last one. Sprint pole will be Max Verstappen. The sprint win will be Max Verstappen. Then real pole will be Lando Norris. The win will go to Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri will be in second. And Charles Leclerc will be in third.
His races sound boring.
Yeah. Well done, Harry, by the way, for winning the biggest first world problem of the episode. There was a quad bike in the back of your recording.
Quad bike, I'm on Greece. Oh, bugger off.
Yeah, you're not welcome back, Harry. Stay where you are.
Stay the Bognor Regis of Europe, or whatever you called it.
What's yours looking like?
Just realised that Bognor Regis is also in Europe. It is. So that point doesn't work.
Sadly, I don't like to associate with it, but it is, yes.
Cut it off and kick it into the sea. Sprint pole, I've gone Oscar Piastri. Sprint wing, I've gone Oscar Piastri. Pole, I've gone Lando Norris. Wing, I've gone Lewis Hamilton. Second place, I've gone for Lando Norris. Third place, I've gone Charles Leclerc.
Oh, I really thought we were going to match for a while. Then. Really thought. So I have got sprint pole, Oscar Piastri. Sprint win, Oscar Piastri. Pole position, Lando Norris. I've gone with the other Ferrari. Race win, Charles Leclerc. Second place, Oscar Piastri. Third place, Lando Norris.
Oh, okay. That's fine because we've equally cursed a driver there, so we can't be blamed.
We probably still can. We get blamed for a lot on this podcast.
That's true.
Just read the YouTube comments. We get blamed for everything.
Free late breaking.
Free late breaking.